Welcome to Dragon Ball Dissection, the ongoing Dragon Ball review and analysis series. We're currently in the Majin Boo arc, and Goku has just returned to the afterlife so that he can finally, surely, pass things off to the next generation. Let me start out by addressing something from last episode. Well, the last manga episode, since the last episode was about a Broly clone covered in sludge. There I gave my thoughts on Goku's fight with Majin Boo. My main complaint in regards to Goku revealing Super Saiyan 3 is that it retroactively means he could have used it against Vegeta to end the fight immediately. Because he doesn't, the fight drags out and Majin Buu is revived. Since that video came out, I have received lots and lots and lots of comments asserting that the amount of energy Goku would have pumped out at Super Saiyan 3 would have immediately awakened Buu, which is a strong justification for why he would have chosen not to use it. Now, since I based a lot of my argument around Goku's culpability, his characterization, and the theme of passing the torch on this particular act, or rather the omission of this particular act, it would indeed create a huge dent in that argument were this the case. Because of that, I want to be clear what I'm basing my conclusion off of, and as always, you're free to interpret these events however you prefer. Like a lot of aspects of Bobby D's magic and technology, the story doesn't delve deeply enough into the rules to expressly disprove you. However, it does present sufficient detail that I don't really think it's reasonable to assume that would have been the outcome, nor that Goku intentionally held it back for that purpose. Most simply, it contradicts his own stated reasoning. Don't get me wrong, it would have held a lot more water as far as I'm concerned if he had told Vegeta he was holding back because he was afraid using it would have awakened Buu, but that's not what he says. He says he was afraid he would need it later, which, as I argued last time, is pretty terrible reasoning. But it's impossible to deny that it is his reasoning. Moving away from Goku's intent, though, is the broader idea that him simply using it, realizing the danger or not, would be powerful enough to immediately awaken Buu, and, well, no. It doesn't work that way. Honestly, I thought I'd gone into more detail regarding what we know about how Bobby D's energy collection works. And I did explore some hypothetical topics related to that, such as whether or not Vegeta killing those bystanders counts for energy, or whether Bobby D could have set up a portal at the tournament to allow, say, Videl versus Popovich to gather energy for him. But given all the other topics I was covering at the time, perhaps you can forgive me for only alluding to the rules. During the course of the story, we see two methods Bobby D has for collecting energy. The first is to stab a victim with this thing, and draw out energy directly. We only see that used once against Gohan. From that point on, Bobby D switches to his weird little tournament thing, which is still in effect when Goku and Vegeta fight. Under that system, energy is not collected simply for existing or being used. We know this because Bobby D complains about the Goku-Yakon fight not collecting energy despite the fact that Goku is literally pumping out Super Saiyan Ki. That's because, for whatever magical reason, the only way energy can be collected is for it to be damage energy. This is why these encounters are set up as individual levels of combat. It's why Kaioshin doesn't want his allies to fight alone. It's why Goku says he has to finish his fight with Vegeta as quickly as possible. So, no, Goku simply transforming into Super Saiyan 3 would have no effect on Majin Buu's revival at all, no matter how strong it is. Here's where things get a little muddy, but I don't think terribly muddy. Gohan asserts that since Goku and Vegeta are fighting at a level beyond Super Saiyan, the damage energy is much higher and that's why Buu awakens so quickly. That could be interpreted to imply that if Goku fought Vegeta as Super Saiyan 3, that damage energy would be ever greater. But here's the really weird thing. The story heavily suggests that not only does the energy have to be damage energy, that energy has to come from Bobby D's opponents. Pui Pui more or less confirms that to Vegeta when the latter boasts that all he has to do to keep Buu from getting energy is to not receive any damage. It doesn't matter that Pui Pui takes damage or that Yakon explodes. Bobby D's minions seemingly don't count. That's a pretty inefficient system. I don't understand why Bobby D couldn't have designed it so that all damage energy would be collected, so that he'd be reaping the benefits regardless of which side is winning. It does indeed come across as an arbitrary video game setup, so that the heroes have an opportunity to come out of this victorious rather than their every action dooming them. But if you look at it from the perspective of damage inflicted rather than damage received, I suppose it can make sense. Bobby D has used his magic to create a covenant, that allows evil, violent acts perpetrated by those within that covenant to be harvested. Basically, if you imagine this feeds off of the harm of evil acts, that would justify why the hero's actions against Bobby D's minions cannot be collected. He's not picking up just any old damage. That is clearly supposition on my part, but it is the only way I can see to reconcile it. The wrinkle here, of course, is Vegeta, who over the course of this scenario transitions from Bobby D's enemy to Bobby D's ally. It feels difficult to accept the damage energy he receives counts while he's fighting Pui Pui, but stops being counted while he's fighting Goku, but if my above supposition holds any weight, that could justify it. The damage he inflicts would not be harvestable until he joins that covenant. But regardless of whether the rules make sense, that is the precedent the story seems to have set. If we're expecting any kind of consistency at all, I'd argue very strongly that no damage Goku inflicts on Vegeta should contribute to Majin Buu's awakening. And again, that is supported by Goku's assertion that he needs to end this fight quickly, as in, he needs to defeat Vegeta quickly. His concern is not about being too powerful, it's about keeping his own damage to a minimum. He says exactly that during the same exchange, that he doesn't want to get hurt and thereby give energy to Boo. Them ultimately fighting at a very high but evenly matched level means that Goku has little opportunity to avoid taking damage. An ideal situation would play out like Vegeta versus Pui Pui. Goku would be able to quickly and easily dispatch his foe while contributing no energy to the revival of Majin Buu. And that is why I find it so inane that a character who clearly recognizes that fact would not use the tool in his arsenal that would allow him to do so. Alright, I hope that clears that up. I'm going to move on now. Uranai Baba has transported Goku back to the next world, and isn't this a sight for sore eyes? Hey, it looks like Enma has brushed up on his English and updated his welcome sign. Now that God is no longer around to keep him in check, Goku bypasses all kinds of bureaucracy and decorum to jump to the head of the line and demand an audience with Enma. And Enma's fine with that because he's very concerned about the huge influx of souls from Earth. I don't think Goku does much to comfort him when he speculates that perhaps the entire kit and caboodle might be coming up soon. Goku's more interested in whether or not Gohan passed by, but Enma assures Goku he hasn't. He has, however, seen Dabra and sent him to heaven since he thought hell would be too pleasurable for him. As if it wasn't clear enough, the demon realm and hell are not the same thing. Goku is shocked I say, at the possibility that Gohan is alive. I mean, he covered his tracks so well! And now that Goku devotes more than a second's thought to it, he immediately discovers Gohan's key and teleports right to it. You know what? Fine, I'll give it a pass, as dubious as that is. Goku even says that Gohan isn't here in the afterlife, and if you look at outside the manga but Toriyama created depictions of the cosmos, it's clear that he ain't. But I'll accept that it's somehow closer, even if that's just a spiritual closeness. Whatever. There's already more than enough about Gohan's supposed death that doesn't make sense. But don't anybody ever try to tell me again that location has no bearing on ability to teleport. We've seen that that's not the case. Anyway, Goku arrives in the Kaioshin realm and is reunited with Gohan and the others. Kibito has yet another freakout. More humans? Despite that vote against him, Goku is allowed to stay. Gohan has mastered the Z-Sword in the half hour or so he's been here. Then again, it's not as if Gohan doesn't have some sword-wielding experience. However, Goku is more interested in getting food, so they take a break and fly off to... I really don't know where. The scene ends here, so Toriyama doesn't have to give an answer. It's a small thing, sure, but all we see of this planet is uncultivated land. If Toriyama didn't actually show them traveling somewhere, I'd assume Kaioshin used his godly powers to conjure up a snack. But since they have to go somewhere, I can't help but wonder, are there any restaurants here? Kitchens? Animals? Fruit-bearing plants? Other people of any kind? Show me! There has to be something interesting here. Even Namek had some crappy villages. Where does the food come from? A day passes, and Goku decides he wants to throw a rock at Gohan. Honestly, he wants to test the strength of this awesome sword. But Kaioshin doesn't think that any old rock will do, so unlike the food, he conjures up a giant cube of the hardest metal in the universe. Kaching! Steel! Goku lobs the kaching at Gohan, who readies his sword. He's gonna cut that sucker in half. Well, something's going to get cut in half. Kaching. So this is what we in the world-saving business call, a setback. The gods are freaking out, blame gets tossed around, Gohan tries to put a positive spin on this. We've read Dragon Ball before, this isn't anything new. Magic water that's just water, a magic fan used as a placemat. Maybe the sword could never have beaten Boo, but it was the training that was important all along. Kaioshin almost buys this. However, a voice from behind them says, yeah, no, you're full of crap. The sword, however, did house a secret, and the secret is him. The Kaioshin from 15 generations ago. He was sealed in the sword by some really powerful guy. And yeah, I know what you're thinking I'm going to say. Oh, it's another god. Let me get my rant going and do a visual gag of all these characters being dumped onto the screen. No, that's not for today. Trust me, another one of those is coming, but not today. All things considered, this is actually pretty good. At least this guy is not unnecessarily expanding the roster. This guy is the Kaioshin. This guy had the same job in the past. We've already long established that planetary gods are not immortal. Being a god is more of a job than an inherent state of being. And, just to cut this off at the knees, let's not even get into how later Toriyama interviews contradict each other as to what exactly a Kaioshin is. Are they chosen by lottery? Are they born that way? Are they fruit? Are they plants? Dragon Ball Super? It depends on the year. So let's just push all of that aside because it's not important anyway, and it's nothing you'd ever be wondering about if you simply read Dragon Ball from beginning to end. My point is, just taking this on its own, it appears that this scene demonstrates that Kaioshin function in their roles in at least some similar capacity to their lower god counterparts. And since that is a long-established fact of gods, it's not exactly difficult to believe the same applies here. It's pretty interesting to consider how long a Kaioshin generation might be. Golden Fruit core people are chosen to be Kaioshin and they can live for millions of years. Kaioshin are born as Kaioshin and live for 75,000 years. You know what? Never mind. I don't care anymore. Thanks for taking all the fun out of this. Where was I? Oh yeah. As far as introducing a new god goes, this is probably the best way it could have been done. Was it necessary? Well, honestly, maybe. Despite my strong feelings that Kaioshin is not at fault for anything that happened this arc, he has still more or less exhausted all of his mysterious and intimidating attributes that could have been used to justify him pulling out the key to overcoming this crisis. Sure, the sword itself could have been a linchpin, but maybe it was just better to start over from scratch and introduce a new character for the not-quite-as-new gods to grovel over. Besides, the elder Kaioshin is actually a pretty fun guy. And here is where we dive right back into some classic Toriyama humor. In fact, this whole introduction is chock full of pastiche, lampooning Dragon Ball tropes. The elder Kaioshin takes us back to the beginning. He's a dirty old man, just like Kame Sennin. In fact, Goku even says so. Goku has to bribe him with Bluma's boobs in order to get him to work his magic. He hits him with a surprise test that doesn't end well. If all of this is teaching me anything, it's how much worse the art looks at this point in the story than it used to. And my absolute favorite, possibly one of my favorite jokes in the entire series, is Elder Kaioshin building up his draw out your latent power technique, asking if anyone's ever heard of anything like that before. The other gods are swooning over this, and Goku and Gohan are just, yeah, we kinda have. I love this. Yes, a lot of this would be pretty tired by now. We've had this character, we've had this fake out, we've had this test, we've had the trading of sexual favors, we've had countless instant power-ups, and I've made it pretty clear that unearned power-ups are not something I tend to appreciate. I should probably hate all of this, but the fact that Toriyama is so brazen about all of it, turning it into a series of jokes at the expense of Dragon Ball, makes all of my disdain melt away. There's very little of this that is not deconstructed or at least commented on in some creative way. It is a little unsettling to see Goku still holding sexual favors in his back pocket. At the beginning of the series, there was an innocence to it. I don't know why you'd want that, but I guess it's not a big deal. Now that he's a bit more worldly, it comes across as, yeah, I know what you want and I'm the one who's gonna make it happen for you. You can call it development or maturity, and it's funny. I just don't know if I can say that it's positive growth. But Gohan proves he's definitely not a workable protagonist for this series by decrying that this whole thing is sexual harassment. And that is the perfect button this needs, the next generation coming down hard on how the previous generation got the plot moving. Finally, even the power-up itself is amazingly stupid. It's a crazy ritual that takes over a day of Gohan just sitting there in agony and boredom while Goku gets to take a nap. Narratively, it still kind of annoys me because he just gets power-up, and it also reduces Gohan's role to absolutely nothing. The fact that it takes so long means that he literally sits around until near the end of the arc. But it is a really funny joke, even if it's one that definitely overstays its welcome. And even then, it never really gets boring. There's so many permutations on the basic joke. Every time we check in on them, the ritual is different. It starts with a stupid dance, later on it's the Kaioshin reading manga, and later on he's possibly fallen asleep. Because of that, it continues to stay funny. Speaking of Toriyama's brazenness and stupid dances, it's time to check in on Fusion. As much as I've complained about the accumulated cast members having little more to do than stand around or, hey, play cards, this segment is actually pretty cute. Yamcha gathers everyone up because Piccolo and the boys announce they're going to try out Fusion for the first time. So while the best these characters can do is to continue to be an audience, I enjoy their banter as they make their way outside the temple. Kuririn and the Muten Roshi speculate what this combined person is going to look like. Chi-Chi debates whether he'll be called Gotenks or Trunten, whereas Bluma thinks it's silly to even give a name to someone who's only going to exist for half an hour. So while they're mostly cardboard cutouts, moments like this do make them come slightly alive, interacting like real people. Of course, here we get the chapter that largely consists of Fusion gone wrong jokes. The dance has to be very precise. Any deviation will cause the fusion to fail. So their first attempt results in an easily winded fat kid, while the second attempt produces an emaciated, sickly child. It's not until the third attempt that they produce anything worthwhile. And to Chi-Chi's delight, the first fat version declares that his name is in fact Gotenks. Interestingly, there seems to be a bit of a discrepancy here. When Goku introduces Fusion, he claims that it lasts for 30 minutes, after which they will have to rest for a little while. You might have noticed then I poked some fun at the ambiguity of that line because now that we actually come to Fusion, that latter part seems to have been forgotten. The reject Gotenkses can't simply split apart at will and have to wait the half hour for the technique to wear off, but once that happens, Piccolo demands that they immediately try again, and that seems to work just fine. Once again, Toriyama seems to be tripping over his own rules, but given the length and pacing of these visual jokes, I can imagine it would have felt pretty clumsy to have to say, oh, let's wait for half an hour and then wait more again to try it. Sadly, just like the issue with Trunks' tail, the question of where these spiffy new clothes come from is raised, but never answered. It really seems like Toriyama is in an Arabian-inspired design mood since the Fusion outfit looks almost exactly like Majin Boo's clothes, which also look very similar to Mr. Popo's clothes, and those in turn aren't terribly different from Bluma's Rabbit Town outfit. Crop vest and baggy pants. The story is later going to turn to Majin Boo combining with other characters too, so I suppose you could argue the design motif is a clever theming to illustrate the similarity between the heroes' and villains' tactics. I think the motif is a little too broad to really carry that idea, and other methods of combinations discard this look entirely. I'd say there's about as much theming or logic behind this outfit as there is with Dragon Ball GT's Magic Goku pants. Most interestingly though is how sequential art heavily affects this scene and chapter through the Fusion dance itself. When this segment is eventually adapted into animation, even with all of its dramatic embellishments and musical scoring and flashy special effects, the Fusion itself runs about 10 seconds. It is an insignificant amount of time, even when it happens thrice in succession. However, in the manga, that same action takes up an entire page. That it happens 3 times means that roughly a quarter of the entire chapter is spent showing the same dance. But what are you gonna do? This is about jokes and pacing. The audience needs the build-up and anticipation each time. Showing off the minor mistakes telegraphs to the audience that something crazy is about to happen. Sure, this could have been structured as a rapid-fire montage, showing off a dozen different failed fusions of increasing ridiculousness. This could have gone on for hours, but that would have required Toriyama to take the effort to ink in the night sky, so that wasn't going to happen. And that is kind of the point. This joke structure works perfectly fine, but there is a necessary laziness to this sequence. The fusion dance isn't going to look markedly different each time, so Toriyama is literally just reusing the same panels, making small but obvious edits to represent mistakes. And it does seem to be the drawing of Trunks that is edited each time, so despite being marginally stronger, he is the weaker dancer. So there's my contribution to you power scalers. Anyway, maybe this was Toriyama easing his workload, maybe he legitimately thought this was the best way to tell the joke. It's certainly funny, and there's no justification to completely redraw fusion each time just for the sake of it. But if I was feeling conflicted between lauding the joke and criticizing the laziness, Toriyama stifles any ill will by making the laziness the joke. He literally has creating Break the Fourth Wall to complain that Toriyama is simply reusing his own panels. If that wasn't enough, he throws in himself as his Toribot persona to sheepishly confirm it. And it's true! The fusion edits aside, the whole page is literally the same as the one from 6 pages ago, just swapping out a panel of Piccolo with this new panel of Kuririn and Toriyama. Dragon Ball has shied away from breaking the fourth wall for so long, but this is the best one it's ever done. Perhaps this might be my favorite joke in the entire series. The fact that two contenders come so close together proves what might be my ultimate thesis for the arc. The Majin Buu arc fails whenever it tries too hard to fit into the stereotypical impression of Dragon Ball. It succeeds when it branches out, subverts, or just makes fun of what's popular about Dragon Ball. Brought about by laziness or not, this is hilarious! This is where Toriyama is clearly having fun, not when he's trying to rehash the same fighting formula for the 3rd or possibly 5th time. Gotenks is super powerful, but he's crammed with as much childlike arrogance as can fit into the lines of ink that form him. He dismisses Piccolo's insistence that this was just a warm-up and he needs to try again as a Super Saiyan. He just flies off right then and there, promising to bring back Majin Buu's corpse. It does not end well. And that is hilarious. Just trying to imagine Boo sending him home with a swollen eye and bloody lip is funnier than anything we could have actually seen. Toriyama draws out the joke where it works and then concludes the chapter with a quick cutaway. The fighting, which is the popular Dragon Ball thing to do, is completely discarded for the sake of a much funnier joke. Just to demonstrate how this could have gone wrong by going the traditional route, the animated version decides to fill in the gap with a 6-minute long confrontation. It's fine, but it's nothing special. It's more dramatic, but all it does is give away the punchline before it happens. Toriyama's version of Gotenks' introduction runs circles around its animated counterpart, and it's precisely because of how irreverent it is towards Dragon Ball. So that's it for today. Next time, we will break the record for the longest Dragon Ball Dissection arc. You may have noticed I have been skipping over all the scenes with Majin Buu. That's because I've been saving it all up to explore what may very well be the crowning achievement of the Majin Buu arc. You'll have to check in next time to find out why I think that. Thank you for watching. I'm no hypocrite. To prove how it's sometimes better to skip over the expected, I'm not going to say it this time. I'm just going to trust you've gotten the message and will act accordingly. See you next time.